Nostalgia for the Red Ring of Death? All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Time waits for no man, or console for that matter. We celebrate 40 years of one console and 20 years of another.
1979 in the spotlight. Zork is now open source, and we take a look at the early days of educational computing.
Burger Time, celebrating the life of a true legend.
And many FPGA project updates, along with a massive Microsoft Windows milestone coming up on this week's show for the week of the 29th of November, 2025.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello.
Hello.
Morning.
I'm Dave. That's Jason. And Chris, say something.
I'll be Chris.
You'll be Chris today.
Yep. I'll stick to
Welcome
that.
to the show. Have you had a good week?
It's only just started. Since the last recording. Yeah, it's not been too bad. Yeah, not been too bad. Can't think what I've done, to be honest. Jason?
I've had a good week. I've had a productive week. This will be the week of Thanksgiving, which means it will be Thursday for you guys coming up, or just having passed as you're watching this. But it's kind of an abbreviated, wonky week here in America.
Yeah, I hope you're enjoying your leftover turkey. I
will have had
turkey
been by now,
turkey,
yes.
Soup, turkey, curry, all the rest of it. Love it.
Definitely. Yeah. It's a
Shall we go
Boxing
on
Day
with it?
thing for us.
Yeah, we
let's
got a
do
lot
it.
this week.
We had two great submissions this week from OKYam894. Both are celebrations of consoles, one turning 20, while the other turns 40 years old. I'm going to start with the younger of the two, which is the Xbox 360, originally being released on November the 22nd, 2005. On release, I didn't think I needed one. I was quite happy with my original Xbox, playing mostly Halo 1 and 2, Doom 3, and Need for Speed Underground 2. But it was when I popped into JB Hi-Fi one lunch break in Perth and saw flat-out Ultimate Carnage running that I knew I had to have one. What happened next was a little sad. Money was tight back then, young family and all that. And so to justify the buy price of the Xbox 360, which was around 650 Australian dollars, I believe, at the time, I had to sell something. And what I sold, well, I'll drop a photo in for Duncan if I can find it. I know it exists, but it may make some viewers cry because these are the eBay for sale photos of my original Star Wars figures collection. And what I also didn't realize was my twin boys, who were quite young at the time, had actually formed a connection from the few times I'd actually let them play with those figures. And they were really not happy that I'd now sold them on to buy an Xbox 360. Sorry about that, boys.
So I wanted to ask, did the boys play the Xbox 360? Did they at least get some enjoyment out of the Xbox 360?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. More so as they grew up. And then the one we have in the house now is actually theirs. It's a later model, but yeah.
Going by how old they are, that would be their influential console. So maybe it's not the end of the world. You still sold the figures.
Quite possible that, or the Wii, one of the two. Yep. No, it's true. And look, at the end of the day, the Xbox 360 was a great console, sporting, and I had to double check this just for Jason, but I believe it had a custom IBM PowerPC based CPU. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I think people were screaming at their screens last week about that and Nintendo machines having them. And people just sitting there like, nah, I've never had a PowerPC machine. Like, you definitely did, but all right.
I did not realize that. I really didn't know that. Anyway.
I knew it, but I've never had them, so I didn't say it.
Fair enough. It also had a custom ATI/AMD graphics processor, 512 meg of GDDR3 with unified memory architecture. So that's kind of starting to sound like what Mac do in the current day with the M-series chips. But anyway, moving on. It had detachable hard drives on the original model and an inbuilt DVD drive. Halo 3 was the first in that series to hit the new upgraded Xbox, and while the campaign was too short and easy compared to the older games, in my personal opinion, the multiplayer was on another level. By the way, actually, there was some madman called John something or other recently said Doom 2 Super Shotgun is the most satisfying first-person weapon ever. He's wrong, of course, because no, it's, as we all know, it's definitely
dog mode in Rise of the Triad.
Oh, it could be dog mode in Rise or Sticky Bomb in what was that? Shadow Warrior. What I was about to say was it's actually a multiplayer kill with the energy sword in Halo 2 or 3. I'm going to die on that King of the Hill. I enjoyed many games on my Xbox 360, including Fear, Halo 3, as mentioned, and Flat Out Ultimate Carnage, a game my wife Nikki still enjoys to this day, not for racing, but for the game mode where you crash the car simply to send the driver through the windscreen into a dartboard. There's something very wrong with that woman. And this is the woman that broke my steering wheel controller back in the mid-90s playing Carmageddon. So there we go. Actually, it was the late 90s. But yeah, there's something wrong with her. Sorry. But anyway, 20 years old, is the Xbox 360 Retro. Or do you have any thoughts on it or its catalogs, Jason?
My first thought, and I mean, this show has seen tearful farewells, triumphant returns. It has seen tragedy, loss. That Star Wars figure story might be the saddest story I've ever heard in retro podcasting, let alone just on This Week in Retro. That's terrible.
In my defense, they weren't all my original figures. I'd bought some of them off a mate, but at the very end of the 90s, so I'd still bought them cheap. I'd made money on them, but it is sad. You're right. It is sad. Yeah.
Yeah, the newest Xbox I own, as it happens, is an original Xbox. I got one as a gift when it was still current, but they were starting to come down in price. And then I added more when I found out about modding them, and that XBMC was a thing. And at the time, it was kind of I don't know about most efficient, but it was a straightforward way of getting a nice media player that was network connected. Yeah, they were great. I don't play enough like contemporary games to warrant having a newer, better Xbox. Maybe that'll change. Also, I was never particularly impressed by the tendency of 360s to murder themselves, as we've alluded to. Thinking about like kind of this period, because of course, it's from the 360 that we get Kinect, and that window of gaming where everybody was had a brand around standing around and flailing games or waving your arms. And that's gone away. And now it's just back to Nintendo's domain. Sega was obsessed with it, and arguably it was part of what drove them to the ground. But then everybody did it in that late 2000s window. But now Microsoft and Sony have kind of retreated from it. So I was wondering if we had any thoughts on how that happened.
Don't know. The Xbox Kinect was also featured in Paranormal Activity 2, was it? I think. Yes. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it was a real cultural thing, but now it's back to being Nintendo's domain.
Well, I'm definitely the least experienced with consoles of anyone you might meet. It's been a while since I've said this in the show. Don't hide it, just hasn't come up. But I've never owned a console until I got my Amstrad GX 4000 just a few years ago. Mostly it's because the type of games that I play were always better on the PC. Things like adventure games, strategy games, RPGs. The PC was the home for them. So maybe until about 10 years ago, I always had the impression that consoles were subpar. And of course they're not. I'm wrong about that. I remember the original Xbox launching and being mocked for being a failure and being a waste of money for a long time. And it doesn't seem to get mentioned now, but it was just received wisdom that the Xbox was a flop, that Microsoft were idiots. They're just throwing money away. And of course,
they did lose massive amounts of money on it. That was part of what made it. It wasn't just like specs or whatever. It was that Microsoft, it was known that they were losing tons and tons of money. Jokes on everybody else because they had the money to lose, as it turns out. But that was a big part of it.
They knew what they were doing. They must have said, well, we need to do this. It's how we do it.
Right. This is the hill we have to climb. Yeah.
This 360 launch was after they turned that around and started to make money and said, the Xbox is a fantastic console. It's not just about the PlayStation now. So when the 360 came out, it was very different to the original Xbox. This is the 360 that people wanted. This is going to be great. So console gaming is pretty great. You buy a console, it's exactly what you need to play the games. The games are made for your console, no mucking about. And essentially they are PCs. I mean, the original Xbox was DirectX box. That's what it was called. So the idea is that they're PCs. So they're great. And it turns out that when I look at what the top games were for the 360, turns out I'd played the games already that I would have played if I had this. Because all the RPGs, particularly action RPGs, not just supported console, but were designed with console in mind. So things like Mass Effect, Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout 3, all designed with consoles in mind. And those are the games I would have played on it that I also played on a PC.
Yeah, fair enough. I just did some double checking as well because I suddenly thought, hang on, didn't it come with an HD DVD drive? Because that's where Microsoft put that's the basket they put their eggs in. But in fact, it was an optional external HD DVD drive. But yeah, that was the horse they were backing rather than obviously the PlayStation 3 backed Blu-ray, which ended up being the winner. So
yeah. There
you go. Well, I think it sure is one to collect for, as along with the PS3, funnily enough. The games are dirt cheap at the moment if you go into a retro shop or a Cashies or whatever. And I think along with the Wii, it's the last of the truly collectible systems, as they don't need to be logged on to the internet, and the disc is the game rather than a download token, etc., etc. So, yeah, I think they're one to watch. But as I went through some photos of this period the other day, not looking for tech, but just, personal stuff, an odd feeling crept in. Yes, it was nostalgia. The window is shifting, and it won't be long before some of us actually pine for the good old days of 2005. But what is retro for sure is the Z80-based SEGA Master System, released in Japan in October 1985, a year later in the USA, and a year after that in Europe. So maybe this isn't the last time we'll celebrate this one. And so it would have actually been 1987 that I started lusting after the original Master System, the nice pointy angled one. The one that actually the article on theguardian.com neglected to show, by the way. They showed the Master System too, but whatever. My mate Sean had one, and being a fan of Sega arcade games like Outrun and Afterburner, and seeing the amazing, for the time, home ports of these games running so fast meant I just had to have one. So I started saving my pocket money up for one, and when I was about halfway there, I got distracted by a Ferrari Testarossa body that would fit my Tamiya radio-controlled Thunder Dragon car, and I spent my money on that instead. I did, however, end up with a Master System adapter for my Game Gear and Alien Syndrome for that, but really, the Master System one specifically is a machine that I still lust after. I would think it's the one that got away, and I would love a boxed one day.
Do you think that the money was better spent on the Ferrari Testarossa body for your Tamiya radio-controlled Thunder Dragon?
I had so much fun with that. I had so much fun with that. Oh, yeah. Painted it white, set up reversing lights for when I stuck it in reverse to pull a skid. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had so many compliments for that build. Yeah, it was great.
I would have definitely preferred the Master System. There you go. To continue my console blind list, I didn't really know anything about Sega until the Mega Drive. Or if you're not in the UK, the Mega Drive was the original Japanese name for it. And in North America, it's the Sega Genesis. In the UK, we mostly, but not completely, missed out on the 8-bit consoles because our parents had seen the government drive to get us to use microcomputers, the computer literacy thing. So we had this different evolution in the UK to the US where we mostly had micros, whereas a lot of people in the US had the 8-bit consoles, although not exclusively. Jason, you're smiling there because I think you're a micro.
I'm smiling because I know you guys love to tell this story. American parents were told to buy computers too. They just also bought consoles. Oh. It's I'm gonna come back to this point in a minute. You keep going.
Yeah, okay.
Those rich Americans.
Yeah. Huge campaign in the UK. That's why we did it. Anyway, things settled down when it got to the 16-bit consoles. But for some reason, mostly micros in the UK was what was talked about, and in the US, more diverse. Let's say. Get away with that? We'll get away with that, Jason.
Sure. I'm gonna come back to it in a minute.
But compared to what I played back in the day on the CPC, the Amstrad CPC, the Master System is way more slick. The platform games are where it shines. Things like Wonder Boy, and if I don't know if I can put my finger on it, but I think they're more charming than the Nintendo ones. I don't know if I'm right or not there, but I prefer the Master System games to the Nintendo ones. I don't know.
I've always preferred Sega's take on gaming to Nintendo's, even though I ended up with a SNES rather than a Mega Drive. Mm-hmm. It just felt a bit more grown up, even though we were teenagers, if that makes sense, whereas Nintendo always felt a bit kiddie. Anyway, that's my thought on it. Yeah.
Jason,
speaking of people, Speaking of people screaming at their screens, as I was earlier, the other Americans watching the show today have got to be screaming at their screens, wondering why we didn't cover the 40th anniversary of the Nintendo launch in the US. But it's actually a sign of something that I've thought to be true for a very long time, and now I'm going to put it into words on this show. There's all that yelling out there about how Americans control the narrative, but it's the Brits who have written, propagated, and perpetuate the English language history of video gaming. And you guys keep doing it, and you keep saying,
"Oh, that way."
Well, that's fine, but I mean, it really is a thing. I mean, you've been aided and abetted by some Americans in this, but yeah, right down to this. You're like, well, good thing our parents were told only to buy computers. Like, well, so were ours too. They just also bought console. Anyway,
do you think people want to put their finger on the scale and say, well, we played micros rather than consoles because it makes them sound better? Do you think there's a little bit of that going on?
There's that, and the whole like, well, we went from strength to strength, and the Americans ate gruel and huddled for warmth because of the industry crash, which most people didn't notice or care about. This is a much bigger topic for a different time. But yeah, you guys love being like, yes, we had everything, and they had nothing. They starved. They cried nightly. And there's a few guys out there that are like, yes, we cried nightly because Atari failed. But that wasn't the lived experience for almost everybody else.
This is interesting.
Yeah. We'll talk about it more.
I'd watch this show.
The Sega Master System always seemed just fine to me. So like, it's cool that was like your lusted after system, Chris. In side-by-side comparisons at department stores or so forth, it never seemed compellingly better than an NES to me. And I mean, yes, I was a computer first kid. I didn't have particular interest in console gaming, although I mean, I certainly appreciated what that generation could do, bringing the arcade Super Mario experience to the home and so forth. But I mean, if I were told you're going to get one of these, you have to pick, I would have picked Nintendo over Master System, I believe. And yeah, the Master System hardware, as you alluded to, Chris, enjoying a second life, in slightly modified form in the Game Gear, that was pretty impressive too.
Yeah, that was cool, and especially like I said, with the adapter, you could literally play Master System games, full on Master System cartridges.
Yeah.
In the thing, and you could watch TV on it as well, which is great with a separate adapter, obviously. And with the battery extender, you could watch it for more than 5 minutes. Well, to close, our original Xbox 360, going back to that of course did Red Ring, probably due to me spending so many hours cruising around in Test Drive Unlimited by that point, or taking it to a mate's house for Link Up Halo 3 with 4 people on 2 screens, a weekly event for a while. But when it died, I jumped to the PS3, which at the time didn't require me to pay extra just to play multiplayer online, and that's a whole nother topic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You used to have to pay for that.
Yeah, you did.
Rent-seeking.
Yeah. Anyway, and like I said earlier, we do now have another Xbox 360 in the house, which is the boys', and it remains plugged in as if it's not 3 generations out of date, and it's ready to play at any time, just like the Wii that sits on top of it. As for the Master System, though, that's the Great White Buffalo, the one that got away. I don't need to buy one. Honest, I don't. Anyway, do take a look at the stories and the links shared in the subreddit by OKYam894 for more information, as I didn't really cover the contents of those links at all because nostalgia kind of took over.
We are sponsored this week, thank you very much, by PCBWay.com. PCBWay.com are a manufacturer of PCBs for you, whichever way you want them. They will take your Gerber files or whatever and turn it into a PCB. They will also do CNC milling. They will do 3D printing, pretty advanced 3D printing. I've seen some of the things that come out of them, and it's absolutely phenomenal. It's not this stringy, threaded mess. But they have this unique selling point that we like here, which is the shared project library. So the shared project library is where you might browse for an item that doesn't exist normally. A little thing you can build yourself and get them to make the PCB for, or 3D print it. And Jason, have you been looking to see what's there this week?
Yeah, I found some. And it turns out they even host projects that don't require an order from PCBWay, like this storage and sorting box for nuts, bolts, and more that you can reconfigure the 3D printing files into what they say is 600,000 configurations. So again, that's just, download, configure, and print. Don't even need to order from PCBWay, but they do host it there. A DIY 3D printed camera slider, I guess for your outdoor photography needs. I'm not entirely sure what goes on with this thing. And there's also a Radio Master TX16 Buddy Box. Looks like that's for, I don't know if it's just for model airplanes or if it also covers quadcopters, but a lot of stuff in there for the sort of amateur aviator. And a touchscreen LoRa pager for off-grid texting and tracking. Ooh, yeah, LoRa mesh networks for messaging and so forth. And those get set up at like conferences and stuff like that, or other group settings. So yeah, a lot of interesting, diverse projects up there this week in the shared project section at PCBWay.
Thank you very much for sponsoring us.
So I have a pair of stories this week with roots in the year 1979. The first is about Microsoft. And that's not Microsoft, the Xbox manufacturer that we talked about. And it's not Microsoft, the operating system developer that we'll talk about later. And it's not the Office Suite Microsoft or the cloud computing Microsoft. It's the sizable chunk of Microsoft which owns a massive library of video game assets, more than they can figure out what to do with at any given time. Microsoft's in-house game library and development teams expanded dramatically recently when they bought up Activision Blizzard, and that was a conglomeration that itself had gobbled up tons and tons of properties over the decades. This is a story about not trying to put the toothpaste back into the tube, not worrying about the barn door after the horses have escaped, because as first shared on our subreddit by Torgo Smurf, my Atari benefactor, Microsoft has officially declared the original trilogy of Zork text adventures, originally developed and published by the legendary Infocom for personal computers in 1980, after internal work at MIT between 1977 and 1979, to be open source software. Now, Torgo Smurf has not tricked us. This is not like the Codemasters story. This is not a repeat of a story from April 2019. You may recall that back then, software archivist Jason Scott went ahead and posted essentially all of the surviving Infocom source code to GitHub. Now, nobody in particular had given binding legal permission to him, but also nobody in particular seemed to be standing in his way. And now, mind you, GitHub is yet another thing that Microsoft owns. So in effect, Microsoft had been hosting bootleg Infocom source code before it then owned that source code. And then it ended up owning both the source code and the repository and said, you know what, kids, enjoy. The Zork is now open source under the MIT license. So there's an announcement in a blog post on Microsoft's open source hub by Stacy Hafner and Scott Hanselman, which does, it directly references Jason Scott's bold 2019 gambit. Microsoft didn't make their own release of the source. They just sent a pull request to the existing archive and said, here's an MIT language or MIT licensed language that we're checking in. So pretty clear case of fortune favoring the bold on this maneuver. And people have been using and transforming that Infocom code for over 6 years now with no consequences. And Microsoft is now clearly signaling that, yep, this is fine. Any similar acts of intellectual property daring do come to mind for you guys?
This is really interesting. And I think it made me think of Bell and Unix. So Bell Labs, part of AT&T, were licensing out Unix, but they had a fairly tight control on it, and they tried to clamp down on the competition and people making their own ones, and it led to the Unix wars, and eventually it led to Linux and all sorts of things, and they eventually opened up parts of the code as a response to that. But there's a few other examples like that, but I can't think of any game ones. But I'm sure there will be. But I'm thinking that source ports and all the rest of it, that's what made me think about things like Doom and so on. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the code is just as free and available today as it was a month ago. It just now has official blessing. And they explain in the blog post how to use modern tools to both compile the original code and to play it on a variety of systems. But they're not just walking away from the Zork property entirely. It does go on to say, we're not abandoning other IP interests we may have in the Zork series because, quote, this release focuses purely on the code itself. It does not include commercial packaging or marketing materials, and it does not grant rights to any trademarks or brands which remain with their respective owners, which is them. All assets outside the scope of these titles' source code are intentionally excluded to preserve historical accuracy, unquote. The same day this was released, we got some excellent analysis of the likely implications from Andrew Plotkin, known in the IF community as Zarf. Plotkin is basically one of, if not the single most important figure of the past 30 years in text parser gaming, and he applies that influence strategically. When Microsoft bought Activision back in 2023, Plotkin publicly asked Microsoft to release the source code, and when Plotkin did his Visible Zorker project, which documents exactly how Zork 1 functions, it shows the original ZIL source code running side by side with an instance of the game, he made sure that Microsoft's Hanselman saw what he was working on. And a project like Visible Zorker technically violated Microsoft's rights at the times, but as Plotkin puts it now, projects such as that one can, quote, can use the games openly. No paperwork or fuss or guilty photocopying behind the barn, unquote.
He's a very nice man. So is Andrew Plotkin.
Mm-hmm.
He's really engaging. He's really easy to listen to. And I think you should get him on for an interview on your other show, Jason, the Retro Adventurers.
And we did. He's on episode 28, and he actually played a couple games with us, and that'll be coming up in a later release.
I might have known that.
So Plotkin goes on to say that his sources at Microsoft tell him that they may push to release more of the games as open source, but there are no timetables or guarantees on that. And notes that games based on licensed books, which most notably would be Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as well as Shogun, may be exempt from this treatment. It's pretty well understood that the rights to the Hitchhiker's game reverted to Douglas Adams some time ago, and Shogun was left off latter-day compilations as well, which suggests it probably also had a similarly time-limited release. So will these developments lead to a renaissance in Infocom-style development? Perhaps. While in the legal gray area, there have been some ambitious projects that were cobbled together from the old source code, most notably including a more player-friendly version of the sci-fi classic Planetfall, and the completion of a mini Zork 2, which was a project that Infocom started but never finished. Now, mind you, the development tools that are available today, including but not limited ones that target Infocom's virtual Z-machine concept, are considerably easier to use for most than the rather tricky in-house ZIL language, which represented the very finest in computer science of the late 1970s that Infocom was using at the time. But it is nice to see Microsoft doing more than just hoarding all of their game assets. Now, Chris, we do know that you have stubbornly refused to play more than one text adventure in your life to date, but you could put cars in Zork now legally. Would that help?
Oh, that's true. Or we could do an Australian version where everything's upside down, which has been done for Jet Set Willy, so let's do it on a text adventure.
Dave, you're a little more versed in Infocom's back catalog. If the only barrier was the legal issue, what game would you hope now gets the improved, brushed up treatment?
Yeah, so if we pretend that the legal barrier is a real barrier and not the absolutely not a barrier it's not been, there's three candidates. You might as well ask me which of my cats is my favourite. So of all the Infocom games I've thought, and there's three I'm going to mention. The first is Wishbringer, and that's because it's a simple, fairly polished, cozy feeling adventure. It's relatively short, and believe it or not, it's meant to have difficulty levels, kind of where it tries to have difficulty levels because it gives you a wishing stone to solve things, but you don't need to use a wishing stone. If you don't use a wishing stone, you get more points. It doesn't quite pull that off as well as it might, so there's room for improvement there. But if we wanted to pick a single Infocom game as the starting point for anyone, that's what I'd pick. So that could have more polish put on it. It could have better parser, more vocabulary, etc. inserted. Maybe even more descriptions. Next up is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is the best tie-in that Infocom did, I think. Douglas Adams himself worked on it, famously having the peril-sensitive sunglasses in the box. I've completed it. I do not remember cheating or getting hints. I tried again a few years ago. I am now certain that I must have got hints. Very hard. The game is really fantastic. I mean, obviously because Douglas Adams was involved, that's why I think it's so good. But it catches the essence of it. So many tie-ins are not very good. This is brilliant. But the parser could be helped. Sometimes hints would be more helpful. Infocom had this, you'll know this, Jason, Invisi clues, where they got progressively more helpful clues as you coloured them in with a highlighter type pen, or in the game as you asked them, because they started to build it into the game. They could expand the Invisi clues to make it easier, to make it even to the point where, if need be in the modern age, it'll tell you what the answer is, and it explicitly, if that's what you need. That could be expanded on. Modern IF is much easier. In general, it's much easier than old Infocom stuff. And of course, copyright may be an issue there, but the Adams estate, I think, would sign off on it for the public good, because the Adams estate have signed off on lots of things, working with the BBC and so on. They're not particularly draconian about things, so I think they sign off on it. But probably the one that deserves it most is Planetfall. It's the one that got Douglas Adams interested in working with the Planetfall creator, Steve Moretsky, on Hitchhikers. Planetfall was Moretsky's first game. It's fantastic. It has Floyd. It's very hard. I've not tried the one that you mentioned, the improved one. Is it finished?
Yeah, it's finished.
Oh, I'll maybe go back to that then. But there are many Infocom games that are more than just a drop the treasure off Zork style game. As they went on, they really did try some highbrow, and I mean that in a good way, stuff. They did some art. So, Jason, I want to ask you, what's your answer here?
Yeah, I think my answer, there's a lot of good starting points. It might be The Witness, which was one of the mystery games, and it's kind of the emptiest in some ways, and that there's really not much in the way of puzzle or challenge. Like it's pretty easy to zip through it. So maybe beefing that up, or I've toyed with the idea of doing a prequel game where you are the killer and you're setting up the whole elaborate scheme. So maybe, yeah, again, if the legality was the barrier, maybe that's clear now.
That's not the barrier, is it?
Yeah. Before moving on, I also
game then.
Sorry?
Single out your favorite Infocom game.
Oh, it's either Planetfall or Mind Forever Voyaging. If I want to be entertained or depressed, and they kind of do both. Both do both. But before moving on, I also want to acknowledge that we see what you did there, Microsoft people, when you opened your blog post with the words, "Today we are preserving a cornerstone of gaming history." Cornerstone, of course, was the brand name of the database software that Infocom tried and failed to make into a business computing staple, diverting a lot of their development and marketing resources as just one of the factors that led to their need for a rescue by Activision all those years ago. The other thing this week that caught my attention on the subreddit was submitted by Starcade 2084. It is from the BBC Archive YouTube channel, a segment from the Tonight program originally broadcast on BBC One in June 1979. It's a 16-minute segment looking at just what it took to try to put computers into schools before it was really practical to do so, but some really pushed to do it anyway. There was a school in Birmingham that had 6 teletype terminals. That's not a keyboard, that's just a keyboard attached to a printer. There's no screen of any kind. And that was hooked up to a nearby university's mainframe, which cost the school a cool £4,500 annually. In other segments, we saw more modern terminals with CRTs, which were probably also connected to an offsite computer. That CT64 terminal that showed up, did you guys ever run into those, or had those all been replaced by micros by the time you got to any school computing?
BBC Micros.
Never saw anything like that. No, never saw anything like that at all.
Interesting. It was interesting seeing a physical version of the Towers of Hanoi puzzle. Apparently, I'm young enough that I've only ever seen it as a kind of a trite computer implementation. And of course, it was interesting seeing what looked like a general education class of younger kids learning Boolean logic, which I kind of suspect is not normal curriculum anymore. Like we've kind of gone through that phase and moved out of it.
Not.
Yeah. Not. Yeah. Very good. It is not XOR. It's not. Some of the learning tools they show seem a little better than simple string matching exercises, asking for the chemical symbol for various elements and so forth. But the broader implication of using logic in applied ways with physical outcomes on screen or on printout was a clear jump in instruction. And they are very clearly pushing the message of how computers should become commonplace in home and school to enable better learning. For Chris's interest, they showed the G7000 video pack, which they're earnestly trying to position as a true home computer, which for those of us who spent time with it or the Odyssey 2 is a bit of a stretch.
I did spot that, and they also played Cosmic Conflict on it. I was very impressed. Yeah.
One of the speakers, and it was interesting, this was a BBC News documentary with few on-screen titles. I'm accustomed to getting those in these, and for whatever reason, they seem to skip those. But he said that he saw the day coming soon when a combination of interactive TV and home computers would take over from institutional classroom learning. And if I heard this right, his plan was that neighborhood grandmothers would supervise the remote learning and development of 2 or 3 nearby kids over the span of 10 to 15 years. Would you guys have preferred this system to your school experience?
I mean, if you'd asked me, I would have said yes, because I could probably pull the wool over their eyes and sit and play games all day and get away with it. But
that's true.
Are we not maybe approaching that now, where we might have AI helping teachers to the point where we have larger class sizes? And I mean, although I bet you if you'd asked that question 20 years ago, we said, are we not nearly at that point now? So maybe, I don't know. In primary school, we had the much memed BBC Micro on a trolley. This must have got across the channel, Jason. You must have seen people talking about BBC Micro on a trolley.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with it, and my first school experience was the Apple IIe on a trolley.
I thought it would be that. Yep. So yeah, this is a trolley shared across the whole school. It got wheeled into the classroom. The whole class gathers round while the teacher gingerly presses a button to make Pog jump or something. By the time I got to, this was the early 80s, so there just wasn't, it was just starting really. And by the time I got to secondary school, nearly in my teens, there was a lab full of BBC Micros. And then Apple Macintoshes were added, so we could play Shuffle Puck Cafe. And then in the later on, as I was heading towards the end of school, they added PCs, a whole lab full of PCs. They moved the lab and we ended up with the Apple Macs taking a backseat to the PCs. So they moved from BBCs to the Apple Mac to the IBM PC. And yeah, I mean, compared to a teacher lecturing me on how a computer works, would I want to see an expert giving me a really good lecture on it? I mean, these days I love nothing better than sitting and watching a YouTube video of someone who really is enthusiastic about something. So maybe getting taught by someone like, I know, Professor Brian Cox rather than my physics teacher would be good. So maybe that's how it works. I don't know.
I found this video very interesting because I actually worked at a national level in Australia in e-learning, as we called it at the time. But ironically, I can't really talk too much about that. But what I feel I can say is this piece was perhaps ahead of the curve, as we now have, we 100%, we have the technology to do online education or education through computers. I know for one, my son Luke's uni study is 100% online unless it's a field trip. And I know for study like that or anything that is lecture-based, some of the current gen, they actually prefer online and not always live either, because what that means is they can pause it to make notes. They can actually watch it back at 200% normal speed and still take it in. And if they miss something, they can rewind rather than popping up a hand to ask questions. So it's very good for that kind of engagement. However, of course, there are some areas of study that still struggle with online delivery, and quite rightly so, because some things are very practical. They're hands-on, and you can't always do that either well or even safely in an online environment. So it's a balance between the two. You use technology where and when it's of benefit, and you put it down when it's not. And maybe there's a lesson in that for the rest of us as well. No pun intended on the word lesson, by the way.
So my other takeaway from the BBC piece hit me while I was listening to the middle-aged teachers rightly saying that already, some children are arriving at school knowing more about computers than their teachers do, and saying that trend would accelerate, which it clearly did. That was obviously true for a good long while, decades even. But I wonder how true that is anymore. I mean, we are now generations into younger people growing up with what we broadly recognize as personal computing, that the form factor and the OS changes, but we'd all broadly lump it as personal computing. So if that's not true, if kids aren't ahead of the curve in computing anymore, what is that next generational technology that's still waiting in the wings, the one where the children will again be able to lead we elders into something new and exciting?
On to housekeeping, and I'd like to welcome on a new patron. So welcome in Dave, not me, different Dave. Welcome in, Dave. Thank you for becoming an official twirler. If you wanted to become a twirler, where would you go, Chris?
You'd go to patreon.com/This Week in Retro.
Boom.
Well done.
I nearly threw the R in. I don't know why I keep wanting to throw the R in.
It's just very rhythmic.
Yeah.
News that won't surprise anyone. The Mars FPGA project, which was once hailed as the successor to the phenomenal Mr. project, is now officially dead. As expected. There's been hardly any news about it for a long, long time. The rise of the all-in-one boards like Tachyudons and the Mr. Multisystem 2 meant that what Mars was pitching to do was just miles away, miles above the expense of the original Mr., and then miles and miles above the expense of the new boards. And as good a time as any to say that Tachy's orders for his all-in-one are starting to come out now. A small batch sent to test things might be arriving with people as this arrives. And there's a delay with the rest of the bulk shipping expecting to start early 2026. Heber's multi-system 2 orders are coming out and have been coming out since August. They've been churning them out. There's loads of them, lots to get through. And the Vectrex Mini Kickstarter, which is not FPGA, it's reached its final goal at $1 million. And that unlocks all of the stretch goals. And this weekend is the final weekend of the campaign. If you do want to get on that, I backed it. Jason, you on?
Yep. All that screaming you hear now are the original Vectrex investors wondering, where were these people 42 years ago when we were trying to sell this thing for real?
That's true.
It was a fantastic product all those years ago, it's better now. Are you on it? Are you on the Kickstarter, Jason?
Me, no. The only kickstarting I've ever done was that Spectrum that I'm still waiting for.
I'm still very tempted, but I'm saving up for a box SEGA Master System.
Yeah. There's no news on the Spectrum Next and the Commodore 64 Ultimate from last week. People are hoping to get them for Christmas. I've no reason to believe that that's impossible. So fingers crossed you receive them. I think I'll get my Commodore 64 for Christmas. On to news in brief and top stories this week. A raycasting FPS is being made for the C64, and it's called Grey, not brown as you might imagine for the C64. And it's got a look a bit like Catacombs 3D meets Wolfenstein, and you will not believe how smooth it is. It is absolutely incredible. There's a YouTube link there, and I presume it's running a stock C64. It's amazing. Thanks for linking it, Southern Grass 416. Jason, were you aware of this already?
I saw it on our subreddit. I have not had a chance to dig into it, what the specs are. I'm remaining cautiously optimistic. A lot of, hey, here's this FPS for the C64 that comes out. They tend to be tech demos, and then there can be long waits in between anything happening. So before I got too carried away, I thought I'd let it marinate for a little while.
It is absolutely shocking how good it looks, how smooth it looks, and what they're getting out of a C64. Yeah.
Pajako links us to a visual walk down memory lane from PC World as Microsoft Windows hits 40 years old.
And the Analog 3D is out. This is an FPGA version of the Nintendo 64. They say it's 100% compatible. It's only working with original carts, no internal flash storage, and appears at this point no ability to run different cores other than the Nintendo 64 chips with. Thank you to Indigo Prime.
And more on Windows turning 40. It's 20 best and worst moments from Tom's Guide. Thanks, Trosty.
And Jimmick76 links us to a short video from the Met Office explaining the history of their weather prediction using supercomputers.
And Paul, a.k.a. Hermsky, has linked us to his own playlist, the official Crash Live 2025 playlist. There's loads and loads of this, 27 videos here covering this year's event and the 2 previous. We'll link to that as well.
All the interviews and so on there. There's lots and lots and lots to get your teeth into. And there's even lots more on the subreddit if you want to go and have a browse, if you want to submit stories for us to cover, if you want to upvote things, go to Jason.
Reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
There's your R.
That's where the R goes. Yeah, I knew it went somewhere.
Here at TWR, we try to focus on the positives in retro, and that's what I'm going to try to do today with a very sad event. But I want to take the opportunity to speak about how this person's life has been full and nothing short of incredible. Rebecca Heineman, or also known as Burger Becky, has passed away aged 62 from complications related to cancer. It appears to have been a rapid decline over a period of around a month after diagnosis, and it follows the passing of Rebecca's wife early last year, Janelle Jackies. And as of course you would imagine, and in fact from social media posts, this has had a profound effect on Becky. It is a tragic loss. From what I've seen, she wasn't finished with work. Despite having what I think is equivalent of several careers, 62 really is no age. Now, when I was playing games as a kid, it was rare that I heard about the people behind them. Sometimes you couldn't help it. Sid Meier, Lord British, Peter Molyneux, the Bitmap brothers. They all either sought out fame or they put their name forward as a centre of attention because they wanted to create a brand for marketing. But otherwise, you didn't really hear about the people behind it unless you looked, and I typically didn't look. The first proper role-playing game I played was on my Amstrad CPC, and it was The Bard's Tale. Becky was involved in that. I'd like to say that I knew that, but I didn't. I'd not be telling the truth. I didn't know until many years later when I listened or read interviews with her. But what I do want to get across is just how much of a fantastic life that she had. She's not much older than us here, and she was around for the whole thing, from the start of kind of commercial main screen gaming right up until now where we are now. She saw it all. She was, and if this is amazing if you don't know, but she was the very first US video game champion. She taught herself how to copy Atari 2600 carts and got enough skill at VCS Space Invaders to give it a pop at Los Angeles competition. She said she had no expectations of doing well in it, but she won. By then she started to reverse engineer games to see how they were made, so maybe she knew more about it. I don't know. She then went on to win the US-wide event in New York in 1980, age 16. Still age 16, she left school and took on a job with Avalon Hill. Now, Avalon Hill they were, board game giants, and they were trying really hard to break into video games with RPG and war games. So we've seen her as her first career as a game player and hacker, and we're now on to her second career as a games coder. She went on like this, and a few years later, along with Brian Fargo, Jay Patel, and Troy Worrell, she established Interplay. Now, at the time, Interplay were a small company. The RPG industry was really just kicking off thanks to games like Ultima. But by the early 90s, they were big, and they were competing with Origin and SSI, and that's the three kind of big Western RPG studios at the time. They saw off SSI, who faded and were acquired by Mindscape and used mostly as a brand before being closed. They outlived Origin, who were acquired and then killed off by EA. And by the time that Becky left Interplay in 1995, saying she wanted to work in small teams again, Interplay had become huge. They were the top RPG company. They would, of course, go on to make Fallout and to publish... Jason, what did they publish?
Are you thinking of Descent to Undermountain?
No, we're not.
Showing?
What were we really thinking about?
Perhaps you're thinking of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. From this point on, though, Becky was mostly involved in porting high-profile games to other platforms. She's got 67 credits in Moby Games, and I bet you that's not complete, because Moby Games isn't always complete with who ported the other versions. A huge range of games as well, though. From her porting days, you've got Wolfenstein 3D, Star Trek 25th, Another World, Jazz Jackrabbit, Tempest 2000, Redneck Rampage, Icewind Dale, Hexen 2, Baldur's Gate 2, Command & Conquer 3, Age of Empires, Killing Time, Battle Chess, and of course, famously, the 3DO version of Doom. There's just loads of them. But I'd like to go back to her time at Interplay, where it was smaller, and her games, the ones that probably belong to her most, would be Dragon Wars, and she was given Bard's Tale 3 to do herself, so, well, as the lead, so Dragon Wars and Bard's Tale 3 are her games, if you like. But that's not all. After that, she went on to work mostly on low-level software for new hardware, so PlayStation Portable, PS4, the Kinect, even working for Amazon, training people how to program games for the Xbox 360, as we mentioned earlier on. So her careers went from a games player and hacker to a games programmer, to a game designer, to an expert porter, and then to a low-level hardware programmer and trainer. I think that's 5 careers worth. But that's not all. You'll have noticed I called her Burger Becky, and that's how she styled herself, her nickname, etc. And it's an interesting thing in itself. From a young age, she says she was into video games because they let her be herself. And eventually, in the early noughties, she'd be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. In other words, her personal sense of her gender did not match her birth gender, and she formally transitioned to being a woman. But the interesting bit, and where the name comes from, is that while she was at Interplay, she'd buy a number of cheap hamburgers from a burger stand and keep them in her desk drawer so that she has something cheap and easy to eat. And she embraced the nickname, and she preferred to be called Burger, and she identified that for the rest of her life. But it's clear that's something she struggled with for at least 20 years before the diagnosis. She went on to help other people, speaking up for LGBTQ+ advocacy, etc. And my impression of her is a kind, fascinating person. So I'm deeply saddened by her loss. But to keep with the theme of celebrating what a thoroughly amazing life she had, Any surprises for you guys? Were you aware of her on her work, Chris?
Like yourself, Dave, I seldom knew the names of faces behind any of the games I played. So it's not until you went through the list that I was like, okay, all right. So I actually thought I wouldn't have anything to say here. But from the games you mentioned, Battle Chess, probably my favorite computer chess game of all time, just for the animations. Wolf 3D, Jazz Jackrabbit, played that on the PC, and Tempest 2000 on the Atari Jaguar. So there you go.
Yeah, I think you've covered it very thoroughly. For those of you who watched the video version last week, my Bard's Tale 3 box in the background was that at the time that we recorded, the news that the end was near had been posted, but the end had not yet arrived. So that was our little embedded tribute last week. But yeah, just sad all around.
Yeah, so if you want to find out more about her, and she's thoroughly engaging to listen to, I'd recommend you listen to two things. The Retro Hour interview with her from way back, I think in 2017 or something, I can't remember. And Neil, formerly of this podcast, interviewed her in one of his tea break segments, as he called them, which are supposed to be around 15 or 20 minutes long. And this one turns out to be just under 2 hours.
Is that on Retro Collective?
It's on YouTube, both of them.
Yeah, but which
Retro Collective channel?
It's on the Retro Collective channel, I believe. Yes, I'm fairly certain it's on Retro Collective channel. It won't be on his second channel. I'll put links in the show notes, though, so you'll be able to watch both of those if you want to. Both of them are on YouTube. But it's fascinating. So if you want more, listen to those. But rest in peace, Burger.
It's time now for the community question of the week. And the question from last week was, which game from 1995 or 1996 would you like to return to? So, Dave, are we out of contest mode?
I think it's already been done.
Yep, I've taken the liberty.
Step ahead.
Fantastic. Who wants to read the first one? Jason?
Every week it says Dave.
That's it.
Lord Borak 316 says, it has to be Civilization 2 for me. Just for the advisor screens alone. Tried so many times to get it to run with no success. It was the first version of Civilization I really got into. I played every new version, but Civ 2 was definitely my fave for the feel and look of the game.
CRGYT gives me a whole laundry list. We got our first PC in 1996, so games like Settlers 2, Microprose Grand Prix 2, Red Alert, Screamer 2, Civilization 2 are all classics of the year. The one I hope to go back to, though, is Scorched Planet. It was a pack-in game with the Matrox mystique. You play as either a ship or a vehicle. You can switch between them as you like, and you must rescue colonists from the evil Voraxians. Fantastic game, but one I never hear people talk about.
Nice. Jeff Mendoza says Sega Rally on the Saturn. I do already return to it about once a month, and I've done so for the last 30 years, but I haven't played it since yesterday, so I think it's time to play it again. Fantastic. What else we got in the list? Diablo and EF 2000 by Colony Activist.
Frontier, First Encounters from My Name is Uncle Groucho. What a great game.
Yeah, I did enjoy First Encounter. It takes a ripping, but I liked it.
Super Skid Marks. That's great. And Badger Thwart says, what do you mean return to? I genuinely never stopped playing the games that were meaningful to me from the 90s. That's true as well, yeah. Thank you for all the answers. There's loads more in the subreddit if you'd like to go and read them. But we need a question for this week. So what is the question for this week, Jason?
Question is, you've still got the month of December left. What RetroTech project are you still hoping to get to in 2025?
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you'd like to answer that, you would go to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. Thank you for joining us this week. We will see you next week. And just a little heads up, Jason.
What happens next week?
No, you were going to say there's a 2-week break, I think.
Oh, I wasn't going to say that. Oh, well, there will be a 2-week break, but not next week. We will see you in December, but not for all of December.
Yeah. So we'll be back at the next. This didn't go well at all.
Everything's fine.
It's clear. That's clear as anything.
No,
as you enjoy your Christmas break, we will also be enjoying our Christmas break, and maybe there will be outtake videos. Maybe there won't be. If you're on Patreon, you will probably get a new 260 Weeks in Retro. We'll be here. We'll be doing things well into the new year, almost assuredly.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.